You know us, we tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. We are anonymous.
The Great Reset. You may or may not have heard this phrase circling around the internet for a while. It sounds like something you might read in history books describing some historical event that changed the function of the world forever. Well, it's not in any history books yet. It's happening right now. Or at least, it might be happening right now. No one seems to be sure exactly what it is, when it will happen, or if it will happen at all. If that sounds confusing, you're not alone, as it seems almost everyone is as well. The Great Reset was proposed in May of 2020 by the World Economic Forum, an international non-government organization, or NGO for short, founded by Klaus Schwab, a German engineer and economist who also seems to be the leading force behind the idea of the Great Reset. The WEF is committed to improving the state of the world by, quote, engaging business, political, academic, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industrial agendas. So, what is it? Well, it's essentially an action plan to enhance sustainable economic growth in the aftermath of the 2020 pandemic. The idea is that because the effects of the pandemic have been felt on a global scale, there is an opportunity to fundamentally change how the world economies function for the better. There seems to be a heavy focus on environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, poverty, and inequality in wage and income gaps. This all sounds pretty good so far, but this is actually where the trouble begins. You see, the amount of information that is available to the public is limited, to say the least. On the World Economic Forum website, there is an entire page dedicated to the Great Reset Initiative. On the page you will find a few sentences with vague calls to action for global stakeholders to band together to directly manage the repercussions of the global crisis. Another section talks about there being a unique opportunity with the world in the state it's currently in. It feels a little strange to talk about the global crisis as a unique opportunity, and reading further they begin to talk about creating a new social contract directing national economies in new directions as well as the priorities of societies. It just all feels a little strange, and it begs the question, who are these people and how are they going to be able to do this? The only other pieces of information given are two videos. One being a 45-minute Zoom meeting with Klaus Schwab and a cast of other internationally involved individuals who are no doubt knowledgeable people, and the other being the WEF Sustainable Development Impact Summit 2020. Both of these videos are, to say the least, not very informative. There is a lot of talk, but never does anyone specifically lay out what the Great Reset is, or how it will be put to action. There is a lot of talk about poverty and homelessness in Los Angeles, refugees and the impact the pandemic has had on them, displaced people and joblessness, but most topics brought up in the Zoom meeting were in most cases pretty much common sense. Yes, people who don't have a lot to begin with, or were struggling prior to the pandemic, will most likely be affected the hardest. When things get tough, the first people to be affected are the poor and less fortunate. Presuming that was the point they were trying to make, that it's obvious that that's a problem and we need to fix it. That makes sense, but over the course of the entire conversation, no one ever related it back to the reset or put it into any context of any kind of actionable change. The whole thing has an air of convolution and people feel it's a little cryptic. However, it could just be a case of poor communication. The web page, the videos, the lack of information, it seems like they don't know who they are targeting with this message. It's almost as if they are trying to appeal to the rich and powerful, while at the same time trying to make the average person believe the message is for them. Global change will no doubt affect everyone, but it will be the powerful people who make it happen, and thus control the outcome. It seems like they put the minimum amount of effort into getting their message out, and whether that was on purpose or not, it makes the whole thing come across a little disingenuous. Because in the end, pushing for sustainability and financial recovery should feel like a good thing. Somehow they missed the mark by a long shot. Now, one thing we know about the Great Proposal is that if implemented, any stimulus from now on must go to some kind of ecological positive condition. What that means is, if the Great Reset is put into action, anything the government does in order to help the economy recover post-pandemic must in some way work towards bettering the planet through sustainable initiatives. That sounds good in theory, but in practice, it could cause some problems. Here is an example. Just to be clear, this is hypothetical and was just created to illustrate the point. It's one thing to say, hypothetically from now on, all houses in City X will be built with solar panels on their roofs. This would reduce the amount of energy being taken from the grid and in effect lower the carbon footprint of all households, while at the same time lowering the energy costs for people living in that city. This would create jobs and get people who have been out of work due to the pandemic back generating money that would in turn be pumped back into the economy. That's a great plan and would literally pay for itself in the long run. But something like that won't happen overnight. In fact, it would take years to implement, and by the time contractors and laborers were actually being paid to do all this work, years would have gone by. This goes for other things like building wind farms or creating massive solar farms. The fact is, the money that is needed to make those kind of projects a reality needs to come from somewhere, and in all likelihood, it would be taxpayer dollars. This is a fundamental issue with the plan. If countries and individuals are already strapped for cash, how is it going to be possible to raise taxes at the same time and call it recovery? To contrast that, in the United States there is something called the CARES Act, which provides up to $1,200 per adult whose income was less than $99,000. Adults with children can also receive $500 per child under the age of 17. So, for a family of 4, that adds up to a possible $3,400 in stimulus. In total, countrywide, this adds up to be $2 trillion of stimulus being pumped back into the economy almost instantly. There's no doubt that building the economy back up through green infrastructure and green investment makes a lot of sense in the long term. But at times like this, sometimes needs are immediate. People and governments just can't wait those 2 or 3 plus years. Along with sustainability, the WEF have outlined the 3 main components of the Great Reset. First, to create a fair market and implement reforms in order to promote more equitable outcomes. In other words, they want to decrease the wealth gap in countries like the United States with the goal of creating a stakeholder economy. A stakeholder economy is one that includes not only shareholders who own the majority of the wealth, but also employees, customers, suppliers, and the communities of all the people who help support and run. The idea behind a stakeholder economy is that it serves everyone because everyone has something to gain. A good example of this is something like Kickstarter, where not only the company that is creating the product is involved, but also the consumers through monetary contributions as well as conceptual input. Because of this, both the producer and the consumer have a vested interest in the success in the final product. Second is to ensure that any investment made on a global scale work towards shared goals. This is where the example given earlier would fit in. Instead of spending money on existing systems, the WEF believes that now is the time to instead create new ones. Finally, to harness the 4th Industrial Revolution. This is the ongoing revolution in manufacturing and tech sectors, which is seeing a massive leap in automation, AI, advanced medicine, and revolutions in supply chain. The Great Reset aims to focus heavily on education in all these areas in order to continue the growth exponentially into the future. This is obviously concerning for workers who are at risk of being replaced by automation currently, as the likelihood of job loss will only rise. However, in terms of progressing business and efficiency forward, it's a great idea. Now, to be honest, this is just skimming the surface, as the Great Reset has started to quickly become more like a laundry list of wishes that the WEF have been constantly adding to. But we've touched on some key points that would have an economic impact on the people in the United States and North America. It is true that the world has most likely been changed forever due to the 2020 pandemic. It has already accelerated our transition into a more digital lifestyle. Working from home will probably stick around after the pandemic is over, and companies will be looking to maximize profits in order to catch up on the massive losses they have seen over the year. This could mean more automation in manufacturing and supply chain, but there's still the question of whether or not the entire system really needs to be changed. Do we really need the global reset? Is that what the focus should be? Or should countries be looking more inward for solutions? In a way, one thing the pandemic has taught us is that communities are capable of working together when it really matters and truly making a difference. As of now, the Great Reset is just an idea. It may fizzle out and go nowhere, or it could end up in history books for generations to come. Whether it's for better or worse is yet to be seen.
We thank you for watching this video and ask you to spread the news. Put this video on your social network or link to it so that you can be part of the anonymous movement. Together we are strong. Together we are anonymous.